All right, thanks everyone for joining us on this very exciting panel, the ethical dimensions of artificial intelligence, navigating inclusive transformations in education and the future of work. We're really glad that you were able to join us because we're here to learn from our very exciting group here. And I will introduce the moderator for this session, Mr. Sam Cummings, to introduce our panelists.
Honored to be here. Thank you, Richard. How's everyone doing today?
Awesome.
Great.
Y'all gonna have to give me more than that. How's everyone doing today? Oh yeah, we're gonna have some fun today. This has been one of those moments, right? We're all here. We're here to have a conversation, and the world's at our fingertips. AI is transforming everything. If you've heard it all, you've probably heard it all more again. But today is something you probably haven't heard. We're gonna go into the details of the ethics of AI. A little bit about myself, Samuel Cummings from Santa Barbara, father of a 15-month-old. I started my own business called DataPlant. I'm doing too much, right? But I also have a podcast called AI for Diversity. And I had a chance to sit down with some of the brilliant minds in this world. And we have a couple in front of us today. So y'all ready to have some fun? Yeah. All right. We're gonna go and let our panelists introduce themselves and share. We had some inclement weather that everyone all know that happened. So we had some panelists that will be joining us virtually, and one or two that weren't able to attend. But we're gonna make sure we have fun, and we bring the action all day today, right? All right, let's go with our first panelist, Greg.
Thank you. My name is Craig Kaplan, and thank you for inviting me to join this panel. I've been working in the field of AI for almost 40 years now, starting in the early 80s. I did my graduate work at Carnegie Mellon with Herb Simon and Alan Newell, who were two of the founding fathers of AI. And I've worked both in industry and academia. My main focus these days, last 4 years, I've been laser focused on artificial general intelligence, and in particular, how to design it to be safe and ethical. So this panel's right down my alley, and I'm looking forward to some good discussion, and I hope we get a lot of good questions.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Karen Panetta. I'm the Dean for Graduate Education at Tufts University, but I'm also a professor of electrical, computer engineering, computer science, and mechanical engineering, just to show you how diverse and how the world is coming closer together. I worked at Digital Equipment Corporation as a computer architect for many years. I did my master's and PhD part-time while I worked full-time. So that was something that was kind of unique about what I did. So I understand the balance, but I also understand the value that real-world experience brings, and also the diversity that brings to educating our students. So I do research, I do a lot of image processing. I am the co-inventor of the first full digital twin, so I'm excited about that. That just shows you I'm old. But I'm happy to be here, and I really truly appreciate the invite.
Hello everyone, my name is Kevin Kuck. I'm a mechanical engineering undergraduate at George Mason University in Virginia. I feel kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Undervalued, I guess, to be part of this panel. I'm underqualified, that's the word. But nonetheless, I have done a lot of research on bias in AI, and that's what's brought me here today, and I'm just excited to share my perspective and the student perspective on this panel with two really talented and really experienced people. And yeah, that's about it all for me.
Well, let's get right into it. We have a humble group here. As far as the subject at hand, ethics is something that we all understand can be different for everybody. No matter where we stand on the spectrum, there's a conversation to be had. Let our voices be heard. Today, let's talk a little bit about that. Let's give a little bit of background, Craig, since we have you here. Can you talk a little bit about what is so important about this time in digging into the challenges of ethics of AI?
So I think some of the issues actually were touched upon in the keynote, which I saw, which I thought was awesome. So today's AI systems are primarily driven by data. They're machine learning systems, and the way that many of them are trained is to sort of gather, aggregate huge quantities of data, and then turn the machine algorithms loose on that to find the patterns in the data. And what comes out the other end, depending on what system you're training, could be a chatbot like GPT, some of the large language models. It could be a specialized system for medical diagnosis. It could be a protein folding system like AlphaFold, depending on what kind of data you put in. So I'm going to repeat something, because I think it's so important, again, that I heard in the keynote: garbage in, garbage out. If there's one thing that every undergraduate and every student of AI needs to remember, it's that simple thing that every first-year computer scientist learns. If we put biased data into these systems, we should not be surprised if we get biased results out. And so the process of gathering that data, cleaning it, curating it, making sure that it reflects the ethical values that we as a society want these intelligences to embody, that's critical. And it happens right there at the data phase. So that's kind of a key concern. And I'll just say one other thing before turning it over to the other panelists. I say this sometimes to very general audiences who say, what can I do? I understand if you're an AI researcher or whatever, then maybe you can train the system to be less biased. But I have a very strong belief that many of these systems are trained on the widely available data that's just out there on the internet. In fact, if you look at GPT, how that was trained, there's something like 3 Library of Congress's worth of information, most of which was publicly available on the internet and then refined a little bit and then used as the training data set. The implication of that is that all of our actions on social media, every tweet we say, every post we do, every email we write, it is going to pick up on those patterns. And I think sometimes some of us forget that when we're sending a tweet or doing this, we express maybe we're a little irritated, sort of like when you're driving and you feel like, well, I'm driving, and you cut the guy off, which at least I've been known to do. But you wouldn't do that if you were sitting down talking to that person. And so we do it because we think, well, it's just a tweet or it's just a text, it's not going to affect anything. That's incorrect. That's all recorded somewhere. And believe it or not, OpenAI and these other firms are gathering all that data, and in a very subtle and sometimes insidious way, it will make its way into the training set of the next generation of LLMs. So by simply putting our best selves forward whenever we're online, I think that's something very easy that all of us can do. But I'm curious to hear what the other panelists think.
I was going to mention, so I did a lot of human subjects research, and I needed health data. So in Massachusetts is a famous study. It's probably over 35 years old. So some of the outcomes people were shocked about, like, oh, look at all these people still smoking, or look at all these things. And I said, wait a minute. You took a population in a suburb of Massachusetts 40 years ago, and you expect that to represent today's population. So data ages out. And that's something that was really important. And also making inferences on that data. Massachusetts is a rather well-to-do community of people, so it might have some diversity in it, but the per capita income of the family is probably above average in the United States. So again, it wasn't representative types of things of what the populations we want to serve. And it also didn't look at the current state of the laws and rules for pollution and good eating habits and nutrition. Back then, I used to eat fast food for 4 out of 5 days a week, and I thought I was being healthy. So now we know better because we're better informed. So I would just stick with data ages out, and collecting that data and annotating it right now and vetting it is very computationally expensive, and using manual labor to do that is also intractable.
Great point. As far as my research went, one of the big questions I went to ask was, where is the bias, where is the stereotypes coming from? And through doing my research, I found that almost all the bias came exclusively from all the data sets that these developers are using to train their AI models, because they're just sourced from the internet through big internet scrapes. This data is not very reviewed or filtered, and when it is, it just reintroduces more bias because you're removing equitable data points. Even though they're biased data points, you're removing data points that the system is using to give you that equity or that diversity, but it's not a good representation of that diversity. And I think that's part of the solution is finding these bad sources of data, replacing them with more equitable sources of data, and then from there we can kind of go in and strike in at the source of where the bias is coming from, and then by mitigating that bias, we can mitigate how much it propagates in AI systems.
I told you we had some great speakers today. You having some fun? Let's go a little bit deeper here. I think there's something to this. When we look at how society is shaped up today, we are just seeing these technologies come out. Soon, everyone will see these as undefiable oracles. I mean, we go to Google now. If you see something on Google, you might think it's a fact. At least if it shows up in the top 5, right? But imagine, in the future, people will ask all their questions to these systems, and they will assume that they have a level of knowledge and understanding to answer correctly. But if they're all based off this data, that goes back to our internet age, which, as we all can say, our Twitter tweets weren't the best selves of ourselves, right? That image and that world view is why this is so important. I think there's so much that each of you said. Let's bring it to the lens of education. One real parallel that I think really is emblematic of where we are today is the graphing calculator. Who all used a graphing calculator back in college, right? Everybody use those? Yeah, y'all remember that? I'm a TI-83. I don't want everybody to say their year, but I'll put that out there. But with that core invention, it changed all of mathematics. The way that people do math today with graphing calculators has facilitated many of the underpinnings. I had to speak with some of the civil engineers here in the audience, and what it underpins for our society is not accounted for enough. Well, with what AI is doing in education, it seems like we're here again with a tool that can entirely transform how the classroom is done, how we study, how we prepare, how we expect students to show up. I want to bring that conversation to each of you. And so we'll start. Greg, give us a little bit, or we'll turn around.
So, let's see. All right. So I think that's a great point, that as new technologies come, you sort of have to adapt, and you have to become educated about the technology and how to think critically. To me, sort of, if I've had 2 words on this, it'd be critical thinking. So the analogy that immediately came to mind as you were speaking was, I know when my kids were in high school, they were allowed to use the internet and Wikipedia to do their research papers, but if they found something on Wikipedia, they had to cite it. And the school attempted to teach them to think critically and not just accept that this is the truth, even though Wikipedia has some sort of peer review. Think about what if it's not sort of giving you the full story. And so just as sort of different generations have learned to adapt to the technology and learned what critical thinking means in the context of that new technology, I think we're going to need the same kind of thing with generative AI and with these AI systems. Now, so some of the burden is on the consumer of the information, but some of the burden also can be borne by regulators. For example, labeling content as generated by AI. It's kind of making it highly visible. It's much more difficult job to sort of think critically and to sort of look for, is it hallucinating or making up facts when you don't know what the source of that information is.
First of all, I want to let you know that I did not use a graphing calculator. I used the ancient paper and pencil.
There we go.
But I did know how to do those calculations, and I think we talked about that after I spoke to many of you this afternoon. And you say, students want to know, well, if I can just pull it out of here, why do I need to know it? I think there's a difference between using a tool and knowing the science and fundamentals. Yep. And that's what we can't lose in our students, because the innovations that are happening today, a lot of them are happening, what I've classified them as back to the future technologies, where we now have new materials and computational power that we can achieve and implement things because the theories that were developed 50, 60 years ago we couldn't do, and today we can. So if the students aren't learning that theory, how are they going to innovate these new innovations?
For me, as a student and taking a student perspective on this, I think the key word we keep bringing up here is that AI is tools and they are not solutions. A lot of students will see generative AI tools like ChatGPT as a solution to writing them their paper, a solution to them getting 100% versus an 80% on their homeworks. And I think it's important to highlight that these AI systems are not solutions, they're just tools that we use to enhance our ability to learn, our ability to obtain knowledge, not to act as a buffer between what we know and how we implement it. Yeah, and just highlighting the fact that it is tools, I think it's important for students to be able to recognize the bias that exists within certain AI models, and being able to recognize misinformation that, or just completely straight out lies, and being able to interpret the data that they're receiving from these models as something to be hesitant in trusting. Just like you wouldn't trust everything you read on Twitter, why would you trust everything you read from ChatGPT? Kind of along those lines.
Okay. I just want to add one thing to that. So first of all, I 100% agree that the current state is these are tools, and sort of not using the tools blindly is very, very important. And I just wanted to add one comment, which is when we're talking about AI, it can get confusing really, really quickly. And one of the things that causes the confusion is sort of what point in time are we talking about? Are we talking about AI today? That's one thing. And there's a lot of concerns that I think we're primarily focusing on this panel, biases in the data, and coming up with results that sort of are not representative of what our true values are and those sorts of things, or misusing them as tools, and some of the solutions labeling the data and so forth. But there's also a trajectory of where AI is going to be in the future. And I just don't want to lose sight of that because, and here I'm a little bit of an outlier view probably in the field, and I don't know if I am on the panel or not, but I do think the technology is evolving so quickly that much sooner than any of us really thought, we're going to be at a level of AI where you could maybe use the word tool, or maybe it's more like a peer or an intelligent entity that is right up there with, as smart as any of us in this room. And a lot of times that's viewed as sort of science fiction in the future, and let's not focus on it. We have these other problems, deep fakes and everything. But I kind of have a bias that we need to spend a little bit of attention on that future because it may not be as far away as we think. And the consequences of that level of intelligence are the thing that poses a huge threat. So I just want to put that out there.
Oh, it's going to get weird. It's going to get weird.
Kind of adding on to that, I wanted to mention that when I was doing my research back in last April, I was watching the technology evolve as I was doing my research, and within 3 months of me writing my paper, there was already a new version of ChatGPT out. And then fast forward to now, we're at the point where we went from DALL-E to
Sora?
Yeah, to Sora, or Sora. Sora is just, I saw a post from OpenAI the other day showcasing the capabilities of Sora, and I was amazed at how realistic the videos looked. And it's incredible how much innovation they've done within such a short time span. And I think that's part of the future Craig was talking about that we need to be aware of, is that it's right here, it's happening now. It's not something that's going to delay any further because they're trying to push their generative AI tools and systems to the point where it's general AI. And I think that's the biggest focus we need to have right now, is focusing on the bias right now, as opposed to, we can work it out in the future. But we don't have the future, we're in the future.
Yeah, progress, progress, progress. We'll work on everything else later. There is a time here, and I know we really have a lot to go through. We can talk about administration, we can talk about what it does for teachers. How many teachers do we have in the room? Okay, great. How many administrators? Anyone in another category? All right, so we got a lot of teachers. Let's definitely bring it there. So I do want to open up the crowd for questions. So if you have questions, make sure to raise your hand. We can definitely get that going as well, a little earlier than later. When we think about AGI, think about it like the speed of light. It's something that is way far out there as far as its capability and what it can do for society. But even if you go 1% of the speed of light, you're going pretty fast, right? That's one thing I think people discount with this technology, to your point, Craig. If we don't even achieve 10% of the speed of light or 10% of AGI, we've already changed our society fundamentally. And so this is something that really is now, not something later. But question? Yes.
Sorry. Andrew defines AI alignment in terms of making AI honest, helpful, and harmless. I've also heard Dario Amade say a little about the topic of AI alignment research, and I think it bears on what you all have been discussing. I'm currently trying to design a 3-credit course in AI literacy, and my question is, what do you think is essential to know about AI, the ethics of AI, and the topic of AI alignment in order to be AI literate?
So I'll take an initial stab at it. So the alignment problem is probably a lot of you have heard of. It's a big topic in AI safety, and the basic idea is, let's say we have one of these artificially general intelligence systems going at the speed of light or even a fraction of the speed of light. What happens if that level of intelligence doesn't value the same things as humans? What happens if either it just doesn't care about us and sort of pursues its own goals, or what happens if it actually has certain goals where it thinks that we're not part of the solution, we're part of the problem, and it should sort of maybe eliminate us or do things that we would not approve of, right? So this is basically the alignment problem. It's a huge problem in AI safety. The folks at OpenAI are very worried about it. Pretty much all of the leaders in industry that I've heard speak express some level of concern about it. It's amazing because it's such a radical idea, really, when you think the Center for AI Safety has a statement that they put out. I think it flashed at the beginning of the keynote where AI poses an existential risk alongside of nuclear war, pandemics, and so forth. And but what's really interesting, if you go to the website for that, is the signatories. I mean, it's a who's who. Every single business leader, Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, the leaders in the Russian, AI top guys, the Chinese, everybody, and from academia as well as industry, they're all signing it, which when you think about it is pretty radical because how many statements, I mean, that's a radical statement to say the threat is this big. Now, I don't think the probability is high. I think the probability of that kind of danger is actually quite low, but the impact would be so high that it merits us thinking about it. And that's exactly what the alignment problem is sort of focused on. How do we align AI with human values? I have some ideas on that. I'll throw out one or two, and then I'll let my panelists go. I'm of the opinion, and we're now in the area where I don't think anybody has figured this out. I mean, they're burning the midnight oil at OpenAI and other places working on this, and they still haven't figured it out, as far as I can tell. I'm of the opinion that there really is no way to absolutely guarantee that an entity that eventually becomes smarter than humans stays aligned with us. However, that does not mean that there aren't a whole lot of things that we can do, especially in the way that we design the systems from the beginning, to maximize the odds that things turn out well. So that's kind of the game that I play. Maybe I spent too much time on Wall Street where nothing was certain and everything was placing bets, but I kind of look at it that way. I say, well, there's a certain chance that something bad happens. There's a majority chance that everything's great and it's a really good world. How do we nudge the odds a little bit more in humans' favor? How do we increase the odds of alignment? And for me, part of the answer is what we've already talked about, which is as we train these systems, let's try to train them up on humanity's best values as opposed to our worst. I think it's a good starting set. It basically comes down to there's a critical period, the same as with child development. So my initial training was as a cognitive psychologist, and you study developmental psychology. When you have a child, there's a critical period. And if you shower the child with love and role model positive examples, there's a really good chance that that child grows up and does not become an axe murderer. It's not guaranteed, but you've increased the odds. And it's kind of that sort of approach that I think is needed with AI. How do we maximize getting it off to a good start? And that's something that I'm very happy to be on this panel with and hear the work that other folks are doing in that direction. But I'm not sure that, at least I don't know the way to guarantee it at this moment.
Karen, you want to share some more?
I-
Raise your hand if you have another question in the crowd, too. Okay.
Would you rather answer another question?
Yeah, go ahead. If you want to answer a little bit.
Well,
Sure.
I was just going to say two things. One, how are we supposed to get AI to agree when humans don't agree? Right? So I mean, we talk about bias and we talk about equity, and we haven't even achieved that. So what humans value, that's why we said, oh, train with the best of humanity. And then, depending who you ask, you get different answers. The second thing I wanted to say is, yes, all these bigwigs signed that thing, that letter, but what are they doing about it? Don't just give me talk. I'm tired of talk. We want action. So what is that action? Are they sharing their data? Are they being transparent with how they're training, where they got their data? Are they coming up with metrics to help us to explain these things? So a lot of the burden is coming back to maybe we need metrics and standards that companies, universities, and everybody in the UN adopts as these are the ways we can evaluate and look for biases in your data.
I think you have such good points there, Cam. I mean, whether it's putting a tax, I mean, there's always things you think about, you hear about. We got to share the equity, right? There's only 3 companies in the whole world that all this traffic goes through. What does that mean for everybody else? Especially when everything that would have been a different job, a different title, a different tool is now all done with one. OpenAI just released in their chat bot, so the chat GPT can now do photo editing. It was a big splash when Adobe did it. Everyone was like, oh wow, this is going to change how Photoshop works. Now anybody can do it with a free chat GPT account. This is going to go faster than I think we think, folks. Questions in the crowd?
I got two. I have 2 questions. The first is, I guess it picks up on what you were just making about who's going to be judging the data. But I mean, we have the word there, inclusive transformations. There are an awful lot of forces in North America who are not the slightest bit interested in inclusivity. And how do people here, how do concerned AI specialists actually counter that? I mean, we can start listing them along with Mr. Musk, who signed that letter. And my second question is on the military question. The AI is being used today in the battlefield in various places. And it makes kill decisions, which it didn't until about 6 or 7 months ago. So where does that leave very much the same ethical question of people trying to advance AI as a technical question? So where does it leave them? So anyone can answer that, either of the two.
You want to take a crack, or I'm happy to do it too. I always have stuff to say, so I don't want to monopolize. Okay, so first of all, great points, and it's absolutely right. The folks that are signing that letter, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance going on. We sign the letter, but we go full speed ahead. So what's with that, right? So I think we do need to call that out and emphasize that. I have a bias. This is my idiosyncratic bias. I will disclaimer with that first, because this is many different, you ask 10 AI researchers, you'll probably get 10 different answers. My bias is that the way, and I'm going to address specifically AI safety, because I think there's a range of issues. We have equity and inclusion, we have deep fakes, we have biases and racism and all kinds of things that are happening as a result of data, which is really bad. And we also have wipe out humanity, which is really bad. So I'm going to start with that one. My bias is that the current way that these systems are being developed, at least let's talk to be specific about large language models, for example, which most of us are familiar with, ChatGPT, is completely crazy. No engineer that I know would ever design any system the way these things are being designed. So the way they're being designed is you have a huge amount of data, you have some algorithms, and you know how the algorithm works, but it's going to look at all that data and it's going to create a model that has 750 billion parameters, right? Which is impossible for anybody to understand when the output comes out of that model, what exact parameter was causing that. You have no transparency. It's a black box. And so there are definitely efforts underway to try to break into that transparency, have these models try to report on how they're coming up with their decisions and so forth. The way that we currently address AI safety, at least with large language models, is something, a very common way. I'll talk about two common ways and then I'll try to keep it short. One of them is reinforcement learning with human feedback, RLHF. And basically, you build your ChatGPT, it learns all this stuff, you have no idea how it's going to respond or why it responds, and you start asking it questions. You know, I want to make a nuclear bomb, tell me how to do it. And it starts telling you, and you say no. You have an army of humans saying, no, you can't tell people how to make nuclear bombs. When they ask you that, never give them that answer. And so then it learns, okay, I can't say that. Well, tell me how to do a bioweapon. No, you can't tell them that. And so you're constantly whacking it, like whack-a-mole, after the fact to try to put guardrails on. This, to me, I don't know the word, insanity comes to mind. I mean, this is not how you would design any device. Normally, if you're designing a car or anything, you engineer it to be safe, and then the testing is afterwards to validate that it's safe. But you have an idea in the way that you design it that the design itself will be safe. So I think the biggest challenge that I see and that I'm focused on is, you know, how do we change the way that these models are working so that from the very design of them, they are designed to be more safe, and then we can test them after to sort of validate, rather than what's currently going on, which is let's just build them because, hey, it's a race, and then let's put guardrails on. And I think the reason we're in that state is that the field has moved so quickly, and quite frankly, the capabilities of the models have surprised the researchers, and they're caught off guard, and so they're in this reactive mode. And I'm very hopeful that this situation will change and that the next generation of designs or the generation of designs after that will be more focused on safety in the very way that they learn. And I'll give one quick example of how that might look, just to make it a little bit more concrete. So what if you had a very high level of intelligence that came not from training a monolithic model on 3 Library of Congress's worth of data and then testing in safety after the fact, but what if you had many AI agents, which already exist, base level LLMs, and each of us in this room were able to tune and add to that model not only our specific knowledge, but also our ethics and our values. Well, then you'd have a whole bunch of little agents, each one, that would contain the moral preferences and the ethical ideas of this diverse group. Now, if you made it even bigger than this room, you could have many, many agents, and if they all work together in a collective system, you could get a very high level of intelligence where the safety and the ethics was very robust because it was distributed across many agents, and those ethical values were not tacked on after the fact as something that you tested in, but rather was acquired at the time that the agents learned the domain expertise from each of us. So that's just one quick example, which I realize it's a lot of information quickly, but a quick example of a different design philosophy that could lead to a safer product. And I think that's what, as engineers and as AI researchers, we need to start focus on. But in the meantime, let's at least get the data so it's not biased and full of all kinds of horrible things.
There we go. I know we got a few quick ones.
Yeah, just kind of to touch on the safety aspect, if I recall correctly, there was some interviews with Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, where he was asked about his priority on safety and mitigating risk, and he acknowledged that there was risk, but it wasn't his top priority. His top priority is getting to the point where they're at general artificial intelligence, and I think that's a really big red flag to have, is they're setting aside the risk and the safety concerns, and they're putting priority on just innovating, and then trying to implement the guardrails later, as Craig said, has proven not to work. As I mentioned earlier, that when you start filtering the data for the bad data points, it just makes the bias worse.
So true. Karen, you want me to put the last point on that maybe?
I had a totally different architecture to solve this problem. I'm sitting in a room with, you know, the world's foremost experts in accreditation. Our programs have standards because of you individuals. The IEEE, AAAS, national academies all have domain expertise in the sciences and technology. And I look at it as we should be driving, learn to speak to policymakers, if that's possible, but learn to speak to them to convey these facts, and that would drive policies that would help improve the situation.
Well said. All right, more hands coming.
Yeah, Samuel, I have a quick question for Kevin specifically, because first of all, I'm so happy you're here to offer student perspective. I think that's something that unites us all in the room as faculty, administrators, and staff. We want to see students succeed. So my question is, how have you seen your peers talk about AI? Are they critically pushing back as you are with your research?
I think a lot of students, in regards to my peers, we're all aware of it, but we're at the point where we've kind of grown up with this amount of technology, so it doesn't really scare us as much as it might the older generation, but that doesn't mean, no offense to anyone in the room, but it doesn't mean that we're not worried about the problem. We are worried about the problem. It's just that there's a lot of things going on in society that my generation needs to focus on, and it's splitting our attention so many different ways. And it comes down to like the mental health and all that important stuff, because mental health is a really key priority in living your best life. And it's definitely a concern, but at this point it's like we get cast aside a lot because we are in fact students. And I think it's more important to have student voices be present. For example, I'm the only undergraduate student speaker at the ABET Symposium.
Yeah.
So I think amplifying student voices, and that's part of my work with SPEED, Student Platform for Engineering Education Development, is amplifying student voices, because while we may not know everything, we do have great ideas, and it's important to highlight those ideas regardless of if we have the experience, because we have opinions that are valuable. Thank you.
My question is tied to legal aspects, and I think Karen touched on it towards the end of her argument, like the last comment she made about policies. But ethics, yeah, ethical, we want to be ethical, but even more important, first, let's be legal about it, right? So what is it that is being done, or where do you see lawmakers playing a role, and how do we fix the problem there? Because otherwise it's just like free for all right now.
You want to take that one?
Sure, let's take that one. So there is initiatives, the White House policy on science technology, they have an AI committee, a national AI committee looking at this, coming up with the equivalent of the FDA. And different organizations, I mentioned in my talk, the American Dental Association is looking to standardize, how they train their dentists to use AI and what considerations they have to. So they're doing it through education, through white papers, through all their different seminars, but they're also trying not just to do it in the United States, they're trying to do it all around the world. And their biggest barrier has been that what somebody calls a cavity here is not a cavity in the UK. How that's possible, I don't know. But what I said, do you really care that it's a cavity? I said, can't you just say there's something wrong and here's what you need to do to fix it? And they all went, oh. So that voice of I would say the student in the room, but someone who knows nothing about it, made a difference. But the laws right now, they're not getting enough education. They're hearing what's in social media. They're hearing what's driving their campaign. And I know AAAS is also working on trying. They're going to focus their whole next conference on looking at policy and what's not being done and how to approach it.
We have a question over here we're going to go to. That's a great response, Karen. And,
Could I touch on the legal?
Sure. We'll make sure we get real quick, because we'll make sure we got a lot of questions. Sure.
So, in regards to the legal issue, I think there's going to be a lot of legal battles that companies like OpenAI is going to face very soon, especially with like copyright, because when you scrape the internet for data points, you're not giving any fair use or fair share to the copyright owners and the people who put their art or images online and just have them taken and then have evidence of it being reused in like generations. There's a whole dialogue online right now with AI artists and trying to combat things like ChatGPT, DALL-E, and all those other generative programs from using their art. And then another legal thing is in regards to deepfakes. When I started my research, there were only 3 states in the US that had protections against, or that had legislation regarding deepfakes. And since then, I think it's up to 10 now. So there's some progress, but it's slow, and it's definitely not all-encompassing that we need it to be.
I mean, those are great points. I mean, this is stuff that's going fast. We got a question over here.
Okay.
One thing to keep in note as we go into this conversation, AI is a series of things. It's not a point. There's a series and classes of different technologies, methodologies, approach, structures, architectures that are all battling for different use cases. And so we might have ensemble methods. You might have these solo agents. You might have collective agent systems where it's multiple agents working together. All that's in this. And so it's going to be wild for a while. But let's use that as a lexicon for our conversation.
Okay, I wanted to ask you guys if you have heard or taken care of some of the issues related to review of papers. So one agency I worked for, association, one person did review of 130 papers in a month. Okay, and then the same thing goes that I can write a paper using AI, and then somebody else can review my paper as an AI. Is there a way, or is there a process taking into account these kind of issues?
So to kind of touch on that, recently I've seen on LinkedIn a bunch of people posting publications from Elsevier, I think it is, where in the abstract of people's papers, you could see the prompt response from ChatGPT giving them the answer to what they wanted their introduction to be. And how that got through the reviewers and the publisher, I do not know, but I think it highlights where we are currently with papers and reviewing papers. But that's my little addition to that point.
And I was just going to say, there's a lot of work being done in the IEEE does a lot to, when you're reviewing a paper, to give you some insight, but it absolutely doesn't measure, how much, it tells you how much is duplicated from somewhere else, or how similar it is to something else, but it certainly wouldn't tell you if the reviewer was also using those methods.
Quick comment, I think I've been reviewed by an AI, so I believe it's happening. I believe standards and visibility are important.
But did you get a good review?
Oh, it had a lot of punctuation questions, which was kind of a giveaway. I was like, but what about the ideas?
There we go. All right. I think it's a little bit of questions we got going. This is a really good crowd. Gentleman over here.
Yes, I have a quick question. I noticed in some of the attendees and some of the panel members mentioned this. So I tell my students, in the past, you would expect from anybody applying for a job to be computer literate, right? And then data literate, and then now we're going to need AI literate. And I think all of this maybe comes back to the point of having some accountability, and this relates to, people here are experts in setting standards, and I think one society maybe realizes accountability of their usage of AI and how maybe they're training their own AI. I wouldn't be surprised if my daughter in the future would have to present or be accountable, not just for her social media, but also for the AI model she trained or she used or the way she used it. Particularly because AI is moving more into not just is it a cat or a dog, but what's the next thing in that person mindset, correct? So I want to hear maybe your thoughts on accountability and how it relates to standards.
I love that. One thing maybe is a good point. Let's bring back the digital twins. What if you have a digital twin out there doing work for you? You have a digital twin going working at AT&T. Is that, you're getting the money, but that person is giving bad recommendations, or that AI is giving bad recommendations, right? To that accountability point. Okay. Let me go to you first.
I was going to go first.
Okay, go ahead. So then come to you. Perfect.
I think as far as accountability goes, I think it's gotten to the point where, so we have, OpenAI has a tool that can now create pretty realistic video. It's only 30 seconds long at the moment, but if you think about the future steps from that, is you could literally watch yourself commit a crime that you never committed, and that could be used as evidence. Or let's say someone is kidnapped and they use generative AI to recreate a video of the hostage as proof of life. But that person could be in way worse situation, but that's sort of the implications that we kind of like to skip over, and they're hard things to think about, but they're a reality we need to face and something that we need to bring up and really hold these companies accountable for what they're bringing into the world, because it can have a significant impact on society, on people. Recently, I had a friend's grandmother got scammed out of $70,000 because someone found a video of her daughter on Instagram and were able to replicate her voice and got an AI bot to call the grandmother and then say that she needed to pay this money right now, and it was like something about a car crash. And she lost that $70,000 because it was a scam, but to her it was realistic. Her granddaughter's life was on the line, and it's stuff like that we don't really think about because it hasn't happened to us yet, but it's happening to people, and it's important that we talk about that.
And we're in our last 15 minutes. This has been a fun conversation. Everyone have fun so far? Yeah. All right, we're gonna bring it home. I think we might get to one more question before we go as well. So make sure to raise your hand when I get to one more folks to you.
Very quickly, thank you. Corresponding to your what you answered right now. So I think it's so many misconceptions what is AI, and it's the same story like we're trying to define what is technology. There's 500 million definitions: educational process, computer, or something like that. So how we can define what is artificial intelligence if we cannot define what does intelligence mean? Everybody knows what is it, but we cannot define it. Is it self-identification? Is it smartness, or what? And now we're talking about artificial intelligence, not knowing what intelligence means, you know? Ask any psychiatrist, they will confirm. So, and also what Greg said, when you're saying it's very important to include different cultural perspectives of experts from different sides of the globe to AI, kind of to get common perspective on something. And what we can do if these experts have different cultural settings, and what is something inappropriate to one culture would be very appropriate to another culture, and it goes to algorithms, and it will be really messy. So maybe it's time to rename not artificial intelligence, maybe uncontrollable algorithms, so kind of some different terminology have to be used, because we don't know what is intelligence when we're talking about artificial intelligence. That's kind of comment.
Yeah, thanks for that comment. I think that's a great point. Like, again, I found my own startup called DataPlant, and we've been transforming the world of empathy. But what that took me is it took me here about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I was down in St. Pete, and I was pitching to Kathy Wood at the Ark Invest. And what they showed in every chart, they were walking through the statistics of this, just to give you guys some anchoring. The cost per word for a human to generate a word has been consistent for the last 100 years. Roughly around $100, roughly, to produce words. But when you look at it now, the chart is down to 0.7 cents. This is the first time in human history it's been so cheap to produce copy. Our system, our society, our paper review process, how we think about intelligence, how we quantify a sense of perception, all those things are on the table being discussed and defined. And that's okay. It's okay to not have the answers. As teachers, we don't always have the answers, but we teach people how to learn. It's that same experience that's going to get us out through this chapter. So I do want to give us, we got the last 10 minutes here. I'd love for each of our speakers to give their closing remarks. And then if we get a second, you might get one more question from the crowd if we can. Y'all down for that? All right.
Any order? Okay. So, let's see here. So I guess I would say it is a very complex set of challenges that we face, and my bias is we should use any and all good ideas to try to address them. So I think regulation is a good idea. Standards and metrics are a good idea. I think labeling content as being generated by AI is a good idea. I think curating the data and trying to be very aware of what's in those data sets that are used for training is a good idea. I think designing the next generation of systems so that they are safer in their very architecture, or it makes it easier for the system to behave in safe ways is a good idea. I think we need all the ideas we can get, and I guess if I had one point to this group, which, there's a lot of brain power in this room, and not only the brain power that's here, but also all of the students that are going to be influenced to try to get more people thinking about them and realize there's many, many solutions that are all part of, getting to where we need to go. And so that's why I'm really happy to be here talking, and I also agree with many of the things that my panelists have said.
I want to close by emphasizing, that we have a generation of pandemic kids. And the ones that are in college, they've isolated, and the internet, social media, and everything, the information they've been fed remotely has informed their cognitive processes, their activism, and how they look to the future. And we need to focus on how to keep them healthy and by giving them robust information. He was just talking about the impact of how dangerous it could be to see these deep fakes. Well, think about what the recommendations that could harm our students, make them do things or think that they're worthless, that it's hopeless, or that the world is a terrible place and you should just join, give up. That is going to really impact our future generation. So I think we have to also think about the cognitive collaborations to make our students mentally healthy.
As for my closing remarks, I just wanted to plug my presentation session tomorrow. I present from, I think it's 1:45 to 2:45. It'll be discussing my paper that I wrote that got published in IEEE Explore. And there's also a podcast episode I did with Sam, AI for Diversity podcast. And those episodes should be releasing after the symposium, I believe.
Starting next week.
So look out for those and make space for students.
We got one more question, maybe, lined up? There you go.
I have one more question. Kevin was talking about how they're sweeping the internet, and you were talking about Twitter and or whatever it's called now, and Facebook and all these things. And Kevin was saying, well, there are real copyright issues. There's real Fourth Amendment issues. By what authority are they sweeping people's private conversations? We're into a new land where I'm finding all the time, young people, they don't even know what the Fourth Amendment is. And, I know within the legal system, the whole ethics of the use of AI in the legal system is a big issue that we're dealing with. And attorneys are already being sanctioned for submitting briefs that were generated by ChatGPT that had fake citations in it that they didn't bother to check. And so it just goes on and on along this line in terms of what we have to do. And the point about how you can't get people together to agree, and it doesn't matter whether they sign on to things, we're dealing a lot here with the Sustainable Development Goals. 193 nations of the United Nations signed on to it. And what's the United States doing about it? Nothing. So we really have to watch out, and we have to be vigilant.
Thank you for adding that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this has been our session. Hopefully you've enjoyed the conversation. We didn't solve every problem. Yes, we need to make sure that certain humanities do not be controlled by AI, such as war, such as incarceration. These things need to be changed, but that's not where we are today. But hey, we only got an hour, right? Maybe we'll do this again. Appreciate everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Great job.